I spent nearly a month planning that New Year's Eve party. Not because I love parties, I don't, but because my daughter, Vanessa, does. She thrives in rooms full of polished people, loud laughter, and expensive wine. And this year mattered. She had just been promoted to senior director at her firm, and she made it very clear. This party needed to impress. So I made sure it did. At 61, my energy doesn't come as easily as it once did, but determination has a way of carrying you forward. I visited 3 different stores to find the right decorations, nothing too flashy, but elegant enough for her standards. Silver runners, crystal glassware, fresh white orchids. I even ordered custom desserts with edible gold leaf, though I had to tell myself not to think about the cost. It wasn't my house. That's the strange part. The house belonged to Vanessa and her husband, Daniel. A large, modern place in a quiet, expensive neighborhood. For bedrooms, open-plan kitchen, tall glass windows overlooking a carefully landscaped garden. But somehow, I was the one preparing everything. By the time December 31st arrived, my back was aching, my hands were dry from constant cleaning, and my feet throbbed, but I told myself it was worth it. This was for my daughter. I wanted her to shine. I wanted her to be proud of me. Mom, did you set out the champagne I ordered? Not the cheap one you usually drink. Her voice came from upstairs, sharp, impatient, already dressed for the evening before it had even begun. Yes, Vanessa. Everything is ready. I called back, adjusting the placement of the glasses for the 3rd time. I smoothed down my dress. It was new, navy blue, simple, modest. The kind of dress you buy when you don't want to stand out but still want to feel appropriate. It had cost more than I was comfortable spending, but tonight mattered. Vanessa finally came downstairs. She looked stunning. A sleek black dress, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. Effortless. Controlled. Beautiful. Daniel followed behind her, checking his watch. You look nice, Mom, she said quickly, barely glancing at me before walking past. But can you fix the seafood display? It looks thoughtful. And once guests arrive, just stay out of the main area unless I ask for help, okay? There it was. That familiar tightening in my chest. Of course, I said. Because of course I would. By 9 p.m., the house was full. Voices echoed through the living room, confident, polished voices. People in tailored suits and designer dresses. Laughter that sounded practiced. Conversations about investments, promotions, travel. I stayed mostly in the kitchen, refilling trays, wiping counters, making sure everything looked seamless, as if it all just happened naturally. Every now and then I peeked into the living room. Vanessa was radiant. She laughed easily, touched people's arms when she spoke, made eye contact in a way that made everyone feel important. Daniel stood beside her, nodding at the right moments, playing his role perfectly. They looked like they belonged there. I did not. Around 10:30, my grandson Oliver found me. Grandma, why are you hiding? I smiled, crouching slightly despite the protest in my knees. I'm not hiding, sweetheart. Just taking a break. You're supposed to be at the party, he said seriously. I am helping with the party. He tilted his head. But you're not with everyone. I hesitated. How do you explain something like that to a child? I'm just making sure everything runs smoothly, I said finally. He accepted that, the way children accept things that don't quite make sense but feel too small to question further. Can I help you? He asked. That made me smile for real. Of course you can. We carried a tray of appetizers together into the living room. For a moment, I felt included, useful in a way that didn't feel invisible. Vanessa caught my eye across the room. She smiled. Just briefly, but it was enough to warm something inside me. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe tonight would be different. At 11:50, Vanessa clinked her glass. Everyone, let's gather for photos before midnight. People began to assemble in the living room. The photographer, a young man with expensive equipment and quick instructions, started positioning everyone. Vanessa moved through the crowd, directing people like a conductor. Closer together. Daniel, stand here. Oliver in front. Perfect. I stood near the edge, unsure. Waiting. Vanessa turned toward me suddenly. Mom, can you hold these for a second? She said, handing me several champagne flutes. I nodded, assuming she'd call me back once everything was set. But she didn't. The group was arranged. The photographer lifted his camera. I was still standing there, holding glasses. Wait, Vanessa said, walking toward me. For a moment, my heart lifted. She's coming to include me, I thought. Instead, she leaned in and lowered her voice. Just stay here, okay? Should I? We don't need you in these photos, Mom, she said quickly. It's for work. It needs to look a certain way. I blinked. I'm your mother. I know, she said, already stepping back. It's nothing personal. It's just, this isn't really the vibe. The vibe. I stood frozen. The photographer called out, Everyone ready? Vanessa turned back to the group, smiling like nothing had happened. Ready. Say Happy New Year. Happy New Year, they all shouted. Flash. 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 I watched from the side. A woman holding glasses. Someone who didn't belong in the frame. At midnight, the room erupted. Cheers. Hugs. Champagne popping. I moved quietly through the aftermath, collecting empty glasses, wiping spills, restoring order. No one noticed, except Oliver. He hugged me tightly. Happy New Year, Grandma. I held him close, my throat tight. Happy New Year, sweetheart. Later, as guests began to leave, I overheard Vanessa speaking to a colleague. This house is incredible, the woman said. Vanessa laughed lightly. We worked hard for it. I paused, because I knew the truth. I had been paying their mortgage for 4 years. Every month, every sacrifice, every skipped expense in my own life. And I had one final payment left, one that would clear everything. I stood there, holding a tray, listening to my daughter take credit for a life I had quietly funded. And for the first time in years, something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make me realize I was no longer sure who I was to her. And more importantly, I was no longer sure I wanted to stay that way. The morning after the party felt heavier than the night itself. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flash of that camera, heard Vanessa's voice. We don't need you in these photos. It wasn't even anger that kept me awake. It was something quieter, something colder, a kind of clarity I had been avoiding for years. Vanessa was already awake when I came into the kitchen. She looked fresh, composed, already scrolling through her phone as if the night before had been nothing more than a successful event checked off a list. Morning, she said without looking up. The party went really well. My boss loved everything. I poured myself coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch. That's good, I replied. She glanced at me then, her eyes scanning my face. You look tired. You should really start using that cream I gave you. It helps with aging. I almost smiled at that. The cream had been opened when she gave it to me. I had noticed but said nothing. Like so many things. She continued scrolling. Oh, and I need you this weekend. Daniel and I might go away networking thing. You can stay with Oliver. Normally, I would have said yes immediately, without thinking, without questioning. That's what I always did. But this time, I hesitated, just for a second. I can't this weekend, I said quietly. She froze. Actually froze. Then slowly looked up. What do you mean you can't? I have plans, I said. With Margaret, my old friend. Someone I had canceled on more times than I could count because Vanessa needed something. Vanessa's expression changed, tightening in a way I recognized too well. Plans? She repeated. Mom, this is important. It's for my career. I met her gaze. So is my life. The words surprised even me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she exhaled sharply and looked away.
Fine.
I'll figure something out. And just like that, I knew something had changed. Not just in her, but in me. I left shortly after. The drive back to my apartment felt different, like I was seeing everything through new eyes. The same streets, the same turns, but my thoughts weren't the same. I wasn't replaying what I could have done better. I wasn't making excuses for Vanessa. I was thinking about facts, about numbers, about something I had ignored for too long. I drove straight to the bank. Mrs. Carter greeted me with her usual warm smile. She had known me for over a decade, had seen me through Harold's passing, through my retirement, through every careful financial decision I had made. Abigail, it's good to see you, she said. What can I help you with today? I sat down slowly. I need to review the payments I've been making toward my daughter's mortgage, I said. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, her expression calm at first, then slightly more focused. Yes, I see them here, she said. You've been transferring £1,800 monthly for the past 4 years. I nodded. Hearing it out loud made it feel heavier. And the final payment? I asked. She clicked again. Due in 10 days. £36,000. That would close the mortgage completely. My chest tightened slightly. I had known the number, but hearing it like this made it real in a way I couldn't ignore. That's most of my remaining savings, I said quietly. Mrs. Carter looked at me carefully. Are you comfortable with that, Abigail? I didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, I wasn't sure. Instead, I asked something else. Whose name is on the property?
She paused.
Then typed again. Her expression changed. Well, she said slowly, the mortgage is in your daughter's and her husband's names, but she frowned slightly, turning the screen toward me. According to this, 3 years ago during refinancing, you were added to the deed as a partial owner. I stared at the screen. That's not possible, I said. I would have known. You would have had to sign documents, she replied gently. And then I remembered. A stack of papers Vanessa had handed me one evening after dinner. Just bank formalities, she had said. Nothing important. I hadn't read them carefully. I trusted her. My stomach dropped. I signed something, I whispered. Mrs. Carter nodded. Then legally, Abigail, you own 1/3 of that house. The room felt very still. All those years, I thought I was helping my daughter stay afloat, that I was sacrificing for her stability, for my grandson's home. But this was different. This meant I wasn't just helping. I had been investing, without knowing it, without being told. And suddenly, everything else began to make sense. The way Vanessa spoke about the house, the confidence, the ownership, as if it had always been hers alone. I'd like to cancel the final payment, I said. The words came out calmly, almost too calmly. Mrs. Carter blinked. Are you sure? Yes, I said. And I want to understand exactly what my legal rights are. As she began explaining, something inside me settled into place. Not anger. Not yet. Just awareness. I left the bank with documents in my bag and a completely different understanding of my life. When I got home, I sat at my small kitchen table, the one I had kept for years while sending thousands elsewhere, and opened my laptop. I searched through emails, statements, anything connected to the house. That's when I found it. An email, 3 months old, from a real estate agent, accidentally copied to me. Vanessa, the market is excellent right now. Once the mortgage is cleared next month, we can list the property for approximately £650,000. The countryside properties you viewed are still available. I read it twice, then a third time. My hands didn't shake. They went completely still. She wasn't trying to save the house. She was preparing to sell it. After I paid it off. To upgrade. To something better. Something bigger. Something she would likely present to the world as another personal success. I leaned back in my chair slowly. 4 years of payments. Nearly everything I had saved. And I had never even been part of the plan. My phone rang. Margaret. Don't cancel on me again, she said immediately. I let out a quiet breath. I'm not canceling, I said. But I need to tell you something first. As I explained everything, I could hear the silence on her end deepen. Abigail, she said finally, that's not just taking advantage of you. That's calculated. I know, I said. And, for the first time, I truly meant it. That evening, I called the bank. And I canceled the payment. Then I sat in the quiet of my apartment, staring at the wall for a long time. Not crying. Not angry. Just certain. Vanessa thought I would always say yes. That I would always give. That I would never question. But she had made one mistake. She had let me see the truth. And now,
Everything was about to change.
I didn't tell Vanessa right away that I had canceled the payment. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed time to understand exactly what I was going to say when the moment came. For years, my reactions had been automatic: soften, excuse, adjust. This time, I wanted every word to be intentional, every decision to be mine. But Vanessa didn't give me much time. The next morning, my phone lit up with her name. I watched it ring for a few seconds before answering. Mom, finally, she said, already irritated. I texted you yesterday. I need you to come over tomorrow to sign some documents. It's urgent. Her tone made it sound like a minor inconvenience for me, a routine task I should simply complete without questions. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers resting lightly on the table. What documents, Vanessa? There was a brief pause, just enough to notice. Just paperwork for the house. Nothing complicated. Don't worry about it. I let the silence stretch a little longer this time. Does it have anything to do with selling the house? That pause was longer. Who told you that? She asked, her voice sharper now. You didn't answer my question, I said calmly. She exhaled. We're just exploring options. It's not finalized. That's not the point. The point is I need you here tomorrow. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling something settle into place. This was it. I'm not signing anything, I said. Another silence. Then, excuse me? And I've canceled the final mortgage payment. Everything went very quiet. So quiet that for a moment I thought the call had dropped. Then her voice came back, completely different. Tense. Controlled. You did what? I canceled it, I repeated. Mom, you can't do that, she said quickly, the composure starting to crack. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Yes, I said.
Idag.
Her voice rose. We have a closing next week. Everything is arranged. You can't just decide something like this without talking to me. I think I've spent years making decisions without you talking to me, I replied. That hit. I could hear it in the way she inhaled sharply. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You're overreacting about nothing. It's just a transaction. A transaction? I repeated quietly. Is that what you call 4 years of payments? That's not what I meant, she said quickly, shifting tone again. Mom, please. We need that money. If we don't make that payment, the bank could take the house. The house you were planning to sell anyway? I said. Silence. You went through my emails? She demanded.
No.
Your agent sent me one by mistake. You just didn't notice. Her voice dropped lower now, more dangerous. That's a violation of privacy. No, Vanessa, I said evenly. What you've been doing is a violation of trust. There it was. The truth, spoken out loud. And once it was said, it couldn't be taken back. Come over, she said suddenly.
Now.
We are not having this conversation over the phone. I checked the time. I'll be there this afternoon. The drive to her house felt completely different from every other time I had made it. For years, I had driven there with purpose, bringing groceries, helping with Oliver, fixing things, cleaning, supporting. Today, I drove there as someone else entirely. Not a helper, not a safety net, an equal, maybe even a problem. When I arrived, Daniel's car was already in the driveway. That didn't surprise me. Vanessa never handled conflict alone. She preferred reinforcement. She opened the door before I could knock. Her face was flushed, her expression tight.
Get in, she said.
I stepped inside slowly. Daniel stood in the living room, pacing. He stopped when he saw me, his posture stiff. Abigail, he said. Vanessa tells me you've decided to stop helping with the mortgage. Not exactly, I said. I've decided to stop being used. Vanessa let out a short, incredulous laugh. Used? Mom, how can you even say that? After everything we've done for you? I looked at her. Really looked. What exactly have you done for me, Vanessa? She blinked, thrown off. We include you, she said quickly. We invite you here. You spend time with Oliver. You let me? I interrupted softly. That word hung in the air. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. You let me clean your house. You let me babysit your child. You let me pay your mortgage. And when your colleagues come over, you ask me to stay out of sight because I don't fit the image. Vanessa's face hardened. That's not what I said. You said you didn't need me in the photos, I replied. Because I didn't match the vibe. She didn't respond. Daniel stepped in, trying to regain control of the situation. Look, Abigail, let's just be practical. We're family. Families support each other. Yes, I said. They do. But support isn't supposed to be one-sided. Vanessa crossed her arms. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, I said. I'm finally seeing it clearly. I reached into my bag and pulled out the documents from the bank. I know about the refinancing, I said. And I know that I'm listed as a co-owner of this house. Daniel froze. What? He said, turning to Vanessa. She didn't meet his eyes. It was just paperwork, she muttered. You made her a co-owner? He asked, stunned. The bank required it, she snapped. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal, I said calmly, because it means you cannot sell this house without my consent. Silence filled the room. Heavy, unavoidable. Vanessa's confidence cracked. You wouldn't actually stop us, she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. I already have, I replied. Her expression shifted again, this time to desperation.
Mom, please.
If we lose this deal, we lose everything. We've already put money down on another property. I know, I said. Her head snapped up. You knew? Yes. And you still did this? Her voice rose. What about Oliver? You're willing to risk his home. There it was. The emotional card. The one she always used. But this time, it didn't land the same way. Oliver has a home, I said. What he doesn't need is a mother who teaches him that using people is acceptable. That hit harder than anything else I had said. Even Daniel looked at me differently after that. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, but I could see the calculation behind them. If you loved me, you wouldn't do this, she said. I took a breath. And for the first time in my life, I didn't soften. If you loved me, I said quietly, you wouldn't have treated me like I was disposable. The room went completely still. No one moved. No one spoke. And, in that silence, everything between us finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. And somehow, that felt like the beginning. After that conversation, something irreversible had happened. Not just between me and Vanessa, but inside me. The version of myself that had spent years smoothing things over, avoiding conflict, accepting less than I deserved. She didn't come back with me when I left that house. Instead, I drove home in silence, both hands steady on the wheel, feeling something unfamiliar but deeply grounding. Certainty. Not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. For the first time in a very long time, I knew exactly where I stood and, more importantly, where I would no longer stand. Vanessa didn't call that evening. Or the next day. That wasn't surprising. She had always needed time when things didn't go her way, not to reflect, but to regroup, to find a new angle, a better argument, a way to regain control. But this time, I had already taken that control away. I had canceled the payment, spoken to the bank, and more importantly, I had spoken to a lawyer. Everything was already in motion. 2 days later, Daniel called instead. His tone was completely different from before, measured, almost cautious. "Abigail," he said, "I think we need to talk. Properly." I agreed to meet them again, but this time, not at their house. That was deliberate. I chose a quiet cafe halfway between us. Neutral ground. No polished furniture, no carefully curated image, just a small table, 3 chairs, and no place for anyone to hide behind appearances. When I arrived, they were already there. Vanessa looked different. Not weaker, but unsettled. Less certain of herself. Daniel stood as I approached, pulling out a chair for me. A small gesture, but one that hadn't existed before. We sat. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "We've reviewed everything," he said. "The mortgage, the deed, the legal situation." Vanessa's jaw tightened slightly, but she said nothing. "And?" I asked calmly. He exhaled. "You're right. You legally own 1/3 of the property. We can't sell without your consent." I nodded. "That's correct." Vanessa finally spoke. "So what now? You just hold everything hostage?" There was still resistance in her voice, but less arrogance. More uncertainty. I shook my head.
No.
"I'm not here to destroy anything. I'm here to make things fair." That word seemed to land differently now. "Fair?" she repeated quietly. "Yes," I said. "For years, this arrangement has only worked in one direction. That ends now." I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. "This is my proposal." Vanessa hesitated before taking it. Daniel leaned in beside her as they opened it. I watched their faces carefully, not with hostility, but with attention. This mattered. "You want us to buy your share?" Vanessa asked slowly, her eyes scanning the page. "Yes," I said. Her head lifted sharply. "That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money." "I know," I replied, "which is why I'm not asking for it all at once." Daniel continued reading. "Monthly payments," he murmured. "Structured over time." Vanessa's expression shifted from disbelief to calculation. "You expect us to pay you back? After everything you've already given?" I met her gaze steadily. "Yes." The silence that followed wasn't explosive, it was heavy.
Real.
The kind that forces you to actually think. "It's not punishment," I continued. "It's accountability." Daniel nodded slowly, almost to himself. "It's reasonable," he said. Vanessa turned to him sharply. "Reasonable? You think this is reasonable?" "I think," he said carefully, "that we've been living in a way that wasn't sustainable, and your mother has been carrying that weight." Vanessa looked between us, her frustration building again. "So what? We just accept this? We start paying her like she's what? A bank?" "No," I said quietly. "Like I'm someone whose contribution matters." That stopped her. Daniel turned another page. "There's also something here about scheduled visits with Oliver." "Yes," I said, my voice softening slightly. "That part matters most to me." Vanessa's expression hardened again, but this time, it wasn't anger. It was discomfort. "So, now you're putting conditions on seeing your grandson?" "No," I said. "I'm removing the conditions you've been placing for years." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I continued. I want consistent time with him. Not just when you need help. Not just when it's convenient. I want to be part of his life, not an option. Daniel nodded again. That's fair, he said. Vanessa looked at him like she didn't recognize him. Why are you agreeing with everything? She demanded. Because it's the truth, he replied, more firmly now. And because this, he gestured to the papers, to me, to the situation as a whole, this didn't happen overnight. We let it happen.
We.
That word mattered. For the first time, responsibility wasn't being shifted, it was being shared. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. This is insane, she muttered. All of it. No, I said quietly. This is reality. It's just new to you. She looked at me then, not as someone she could dismiss, not as someone she could control, but as someone she didn't fully understand anymore. And that was new for both of us. What if we say no? She asked finally. I didn't hesitate. Then we sell the house. Legally. And we divide the proceeds according to ownership. Her face paled slightly, because she understood what that meant. Downsizing. Adjusting. Letting go of the image she had built so carefully. Daniel spoke again, more gently this time. Vanessa, this is the best option we have. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stared at the table, her fingers tracing the edge of the paper. For once, she wasn't performing. She wasn't managing an image. She was thinking. And that might have been the most important moment of all. I need time, she said finally. I nodded. Take it. We sat in silence for a few seconds longer. Then Vanessa looked up again, her voice quieter now. Mom, about the party. I didn't interrupt. I shouldn't have said that, she continued. About the photos. I wanted everything to look perfect. I studied her face. For the first time, there was no calculation there. Just discomfort. Maybe even regret. I understand why you wanted to impress people, I said. But I won't accept being hidden to make that happen. She nodded slowly. It wasn't a full apology, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. We stood shortly after that. Daniel shook my hand before we left. Vanessa hesitated, then gave me a brief, awkward hug. It wasn't warm. It wasn't natural. But it wasn't nothing either. As I walked out of that cafe, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about the house. It was about balance, respect, and the quiet but powerful act of choosing myself after years of being chosen last. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting to be valued. I was expecting it, and that changed everything. 3 months passed, and for the first time in years, time didn't feel like something slipping away from me. It felt like something I was finally living inside of. The days were quieter, yes, but not empty. There's a difference, and I hadn't understood that before. My apartment, once something I barely noticed, had slowly transformed into a space that reflected me rather than what was left over after everyone else's needs were met. I changed the curtains, soft cream instead of the heavy gray ones I had kept for years. I bought a proper armchair, not expensive, but comfortable, the kind you sink into with a book and forget about the world for a while. I fixed the small things I had ignored, the dripping tap, the loose cabinet handle, the flickering light in the hallway. It wasn't about the objects themselves. It was about the message behind them. I was worth the effort. The agreement with Vanessa and Daniel had taken a few weeks to finalize, but in the end, they signed. Not easily, not happily, but they signed. The house stayed theirs, at least for now, but it was no longer something built entirely on my sacrifice. Every month, a payment arrived in my account. It wasn't just money, it was acknowledgement. For the first time, what I had given wasn't being quietly absorbed and forgotten. It was being recognized, measured, returned. And that changed how I felt in a way I hadn't expected. Lighter, yes, but also steadier, as if something that had been tilted for years had finally been set back into place. Daniel was the one who called regularly. At first, it was strictly practical, confirming payments, discussing timelines, but gradually, the conversations shifted. He would ask how I was doing, mention Oliver, suggest times for visits. There was a sincerity in his voice now that hadn't been there before, as if stepping outside Vanessa's shadow had allowed him to see things more clearly. I didn't rush to trust it, but I didn't reject it either. Change, I was learning, doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in small, consistent actions. Vanessa was different.
Not warm, not yet.
But not dismissive either. There was a distance, yes, but it felt less like superiority and more like uncertainty. As if she didn't quite know how to interact with this version of me. And honestly, neither did I. For so long, our roles had been fixed, hers to take, mine to give. Now, everything between us had to be renegotiated, and that takes time. Saturday mornings became my favorite part of the week. That was when Oliver came over. The first time, I had prepared too much. Pancake batter ready, snacks laid out, games organized. Old habits. But when he arrived, he didn't care about any of that. He ran straight in, dropped his bag, and asked if we could build something together. So we did. Puzzles, towers, little imaginary worlds made from whatever we could find. Simple things. Real things. No performance, no expectations, just time. One weekend, Vanessa came with him. That was new. She stood at the door for a moment, as if unsure whether to step inside or stay where she was. It looks different, she said, glancing around the apartment.
I ridecorati da vit, he replied.
She nodded slowly. It's nice. That word, coming from her, carried more weight than it should have, but I let it be enough. We stood there for a few seconds, the silence stretching, but not uncomfortably, just unfamiliar. I've been thinking, she said finally, her voice quieter than I was used to hearing, about everything. I didn't interrupt. About how I've handled things. With you. She looked down briefly, then back at me. I didn't realize how far it had gone. That was honest. Not perfect, but honest. I've started seeing someone, she added quickly. A therapist. And we've been working with a financial advisor too, trying to fix things properly. I studied her for a moment. This wasn't the polished Vanessa I knew. This was someone else, less certain, less controlled. More real. That's good, I said simply. It takes courage to do that. She let out a small breath, almost like relief. I'm trying, she said. I can see that. That was the first moment, not when everything was fixed, but when something shifted in the right direction. Not back to what we had before, but forward into something new. She didn't stay long that day. Just a few minutes. But before she left, she hesitated again. Maybe next time I could stay a bit longer, she said. Have coffee or something. I'd like that, I replied. And I meant it. That evening, after Oliver had fallen asleep in the small room I had prepared for him, his room, I like to think of it now, I sat on my balcony. The small plants I had bought weeks earlier had started to grow. Tiny green leaves pushing upward, steady and patient. I ran my fingers lightly over them, feeling something settle inside me. For years, I had believed that love meant sacrifice. That being a good mother meant giving without limits, without conditions, without end. And maybe in some ways that's true. But what I hadn't understood was that love without boundaries doesn't create closeness. It creates imbalance. It teaches people not how to value you, but how to depend on you without seeing you. I had spent so long trying to be needed that I forgot to ask whether I was respected. Now, that was different. The payments, the agreement, the changes in Vanessa and Daniel, those were all important. But the most important change had happened inside me. I no longer measured my worth by how much I could give. I measured it by how I allowed myself to be treated. And that changed everything. My phone buzzed. A message from Margaret. How's your weekend going? I smiled and typed back. Peaceful. Finally. I set the phone down and looked out at the sky, the quiet stretching around me in a way that felt full instead of empty. Inside, Oliver slept soundly. Somewhere across the city, Vanessa was trying, really trying for the first time in a long while. And me? I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for appreciation. Not for permission. Not for someone else to decide my place in their life. I had chosen it myself. And that choice didn't feel loud or dramatic. It felt steady. It felt right. It felt like freedom. At 61, I hadn't lost anything that truly mattered. I had simply stopped holding on to things that were never mine to carry alone. And in doing that, I had gained something far more valuable than comfort or routine. I had gained myself. And this time, I wasn't going to give that away.